Hello, you guys, and welcome back for another episode of BodyTalks Live with a very special guest today. This series is in celebration of my book, Someone I Love Lives Here, which came out over a month ago. The time has just flown by. It's really crazy, but it has been so much fun hearing from you guys, those of you who have read the book or started reading it. I love your messages so much. I can't tell you how much it means to me. So please keep me posted if you haven't read it. There we go. It said poor connection. Hopefully we're good. Always the tech stuff. So the book covers my journey with body image, self-worth, and really then healing around those things, disordered eating as well, my journey with that. But as I say often, unfortunately, I know this is not just my story. It's the majority of women's stories. Like, we all have a story around this stuff, the body image stuff, the eating, the diet mentality stuff. So for me, it's really on my heart to bring other women's stories forward. And one thing that has been so cool about this book launch is I've gotten to connect with other women who are doing amazing things in the world. And so one of those people is actually today's guest. I believe we connected after she had tuned into the podcast that I was on with Lori Harder's podcast, which a lot of you guys know was like massive goals for me. And I shared a little bit about the book. So our guest today is also an author, super excited. And so I'll tell you a little bit about her, and I have her book here as well. So Krystal Quagliara is an author, speaker, and coach who discovered her own path to wellness through applying stoic philosophies and practices to her life. Turning her mess into her message, she's on a mission to help others take control of their health and well-being. Her book, The Playful Journal, which I have a copy of here, walks readers through an interactive journey to rediscover their inner playfulness and bring that to the surface to live a healthier and more fulfilled life. Love that so much. Krystal is also the host of the Playful Life podcast and has a YouTube channel with home workouts, coaching tips, and podcast interviews. So definitely check that out, you guys. And Krystal believes that living our best life requires embracing a playful mindset to health and discovering what makes our souls happy. And I could not agree more. I'm like right on that page right now, really focusing on more joy and fulfillment. So important. So Krystal, because she believes in that, in doing what makes her soul happy, she spends most of her free time writing and performing music. Love that so much as well. And so I am going to bring her on here. Super excited. As I started reading The Playful Journey as well, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel this so deeply. Like, again, our stories are so similar. So yay, welcome, Krystal. How are you?
Hi, Justine. I'm doing amazing. I'm so happy to be here today with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so excited to have you here. I never know how to set this camera up, and then it like cuts off my head.
I've
With the,
literally been setting up my camera for half an hour. So,
yeah, yeah, with the interviews, it's always like I forget which way it goes. I should know by now, but all good. So thank you so much for joining us. And I know I just shared a little overview, kind of professional bio and all of that, but I'd love for you to just start by telling us a little bit more about who you are, what you're all about.
yes. I'm Crystal, and again, so happy to be here. And yes, it's been a tough journey and a long one, but I feel like I have gained a sense of serenity and surrender around my health and wellness. And so I'm on a journey to help other people do that same thing. So as you mentioned, a lot of it really is based on kind of the stoic virtues and practices, knowing thyself, right? You got to know yourself first and where your worth comes from before you can really, I think, achieve anything else, right? And I know you talk about, I have your book here as well, and sort of that struggle that a lot of women find where we put our self-worth in how other people judge us, right? And we sort of look for outside affirmations and value judgments and things instead of really looking inward. So that's what I encourage my clients to do. And that's sort of the overall theme of the podcast and everything I'm out there trying to do in the world.
I love it so much. And I think that's such a beautiful common theme that I see. And I know you and I share with like really turning your struggles, or as you say, turning your mess into your message. It's like the things we struggle with we're all so connected, and so many of us go through, similar struggles. So it's like once we, learn some things or move through it, it's so beautiful when we can turn that into really at least sharing with others that they're not alone. And then if we've got some nuggets of wisdom to pass on too, I think that's amazing. And I
Yeah.
love what you said about the external validation. And I didn't plan on talking about this, but it's interesting with even just this past little over a month since the book came out, really seeing old patterns pop up with, like getting the praise and this huge high of the book launch and like realizing this lifelong dream of mine. And then as it starts to get quieter, feeling like, like where's my fix?
Yeah.
Where's external validation? And so
Yes.
interesting because I've done that so many times. I've been down that road of like, let me do this thing because it's going to make me feel good. And so now I'm kind of grounding into again, like, how do I want to feel and how do I create more joy day to day, which is, playfulness and just focus on that as the goal, like feeling good, not these milestones. I mean, those are amazing too, but yeah, it's just
Right.
an interesting dynamic.
Right. Yeah. And accepting that that's how you feel and that's a part of this whole process. And, not really judging it so much as just experiencing it and then letting it go. And like you said, right, kind of moving on to the joy stage and, finding those ways to be playful and just sit in peace, right? Just enjoy all the ups and downs of it.
Totally, totally. Yeah, because it's really like we want to have fun on the journey. It's always the journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately, it never ends.
yeah, yeah, I know. Sometimes that's fun with the personal development, and sometimes you're like, it never ends. So,
Right.
yes. So I'd love to take it way back, and I'd love for you to share your story and kind of the origin of some of your struggles, like your earliest memories of having this awareness around your body meaning something or feeling a need to kind of control your food or change your body in any way. I'd love to
Right.
hear how it first showed up for you.
Yeah. Um, I wish it wasn't this early in life, but it was second grade for me. So, in reading your book, I really felt like we had that connection that happened that early in life. But I was just an overweight kid, and I was active. I danced, but I wasn't in sports, and I don't know, metabolism, all the things, genetics, who knows? But just always, kind of just that cute, girl in the tutu on the dance stage, right? That now when I see those girls, I go, oh, I mean, that's so adorable, right? But that was me. Um, and in second grade, we had a substitute teacher for quite a while, but I don't know what was the point of this. But at some point during health class, who knows, she decided to weigh all of the kids in the class and then like announce their weights to the class. I mean, I don't even I can't for the life of me imagine why this was even important. So, but when it was my turn to come up to the front, she weighed me, and instead of like announcing it, she whispered it in my ear, and it was just like this thing went off in my head. Like I think if she was maybe to just announce my weight to everybody, it wouldn't have even been that big of a deal because maybe at that age, kids wouldn't even know. Like, what's the difference, right? But because she made it kind of a big deal, like I should be ashamed that this was the number, right? So, and then shortly after that, again, I reflected on that in your book, but like going to the doctor and right, the doctor having that talk with my mother, about, oh, what is she eating? Blah, 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 all this other stuff, right? Sort of that like, hey, I'm here, I'm in the room, sort of thing. So yeah, it was probably around there. And junior high school when I think I discovered boys and that feeling of like I'm different and maybe boys don't like me because I'm heavy, and the teasing had progressed. I was on the bus after school. They would announce I would. This is funny because now I do pageants, but at the time it was hurtful. They would say, here she comes, Miss Fatso America," right? So that was just awesome, right? As a kid, I mean, it's just all the things, right? So yeah, I think it was junior high where I really like at first just took control, and thought, I need to make a change. I was unhappy with the way I looked, the way I felt. I was just sick a lot as a kid, I think because of my diet and, just sort of the overall like loop, right? That I eat bad, I feel bad, and then I feel bad, so I eat bad, right? Sort of that like continuous loop of behavior. So just cut out junk food, cut out pop. I started exercising, at night, like every day. I just really started to feel empowered and started to feel good about myself. And like you had mentioned in your book, right? You get this attention, right? You start getting this attention, and it was even from like kids' parents at school. And I mean, it was weird, and they were like, "Wow, Krystal, you look amazing," and it's just that like you get that high. It's like a hit, and you're just that feeling of, well, if so many more people love me now, like they're just going to love me so much more if I'm thinner, right? And sort of, you just get locked into that. So yeah, that's where it all came from.
Yes. Yeah, so many similarities. And it's crazy because it's like, I feel like when we were growing up, kind of our generation, for one, the school experiences, like I write about how a gym teacher in fifth grade gave me a D for effort. And like, I was very ambitious and I'm like, I'd like to have a word with him tonight. But like, I think it was still a gender. Also the whole like idea of like, oh, kids don't know what we're saying, it's not going to matter. I think that used to be the mentality, whereas I think now it's a lot more common knowledge that that's actually where all of our conditioning or programming comes from. Like people
Mm,
that shows
right.
up in our comes from, that's where the seeds get planted. So it's like a crucial time. But it is interesting because even, that story about the substitute teacher Wayne, you guys, when I read that in your book, I was just like, oh my gosh, like now it would never in a million years that person would be fired and like
Right?
came,
Yeah.
but it was a time not that long ago, it really was. So yeah, I know that stuff is just incredibly impactful. And again, then it just follows you into adulthood. And it's that feeling of like never good enough, that
Mm,
gets
hmm
planted. So,
hmm
uh,
And
so
the fear of like, you say this in your book, but like those moments where you feel like I'm going to be the fat girl again, right? Even when you
oh,
do, feel better in your skin, there's always like that fear in the back of your head that like, oh, you're just one bite away from being, that girl again, right? Being teased, being, back in that emotional state.
yeah, absolutely. And I still like, I've come such a long way, but I still see that. It's like, again, how do I continue to unplug from these things that don't really define me? But again, when there's so many years of being hooked into those things and like feeling like my appearance, my body, my weight, things like that are correlated with my worth, it's just, I think,
Mm,
for women a very tough thing to unplug from it fully and not get sucked back in. We get so many
yeah,
messages
yeah.
telling us.
Amen. Hmm.
Yeah. So I'd love to actually explore, it's interesting for you now in the pageant world. And I don't know a lot about that. I'm sure it's like very different. I'm sure there's some similarities with like fitness competitions as well, but I'm sure it's very different and every industry has its own thing. So I don't know a lot about it. I'd love to hear, how that experience has been for you, if it's been healing, empowering, if you've had some of those old triggers come up or, kind of how you got into that. I'd love to hear.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I love that the question that you had asked me, um, just to prepare for, like, how did I like let my own like my body image and stuff like keep me from doing things? And when I was younger, I always wanted to do a pageant. And I loved it. I love that whole world. I love watching them on TV and everything. And I just never felt like I would ever be good enough, to do one, never thin enough, never pretty enough, all those things. And, I remember even when I was like, the peak of like where I probably should look back and be like, oh, wow, I should have done a pageant then, right? Like I still just did not believe that I was good enough, and then got married and thought, well, maybe my pageant days are over. And then realized that I could do a Mrs. pageant. And then I thought, well, I'll do one of those eventually, right? And like 8 years after I had gotten married, I was like, I don't know, something just dawned in my mind. I mean, who knows what it was, the voice of God, but it was like, remember how you wanted to do a pageant, And I was like, oh, I should just do it. So that day I went, I signed up, did the whole thing, the process, got, accepted in and stuff. And it was like, it was scary because I think knew that I did have these like patterns and tendencies to get obsessive about my body and, my eating and things like that. And so I was very mindful of doing it in a healthy way. And, the first time I competed, I kind of regret like, some of those thoughts were still there with me on stage. Like, when I walked out my bathing suit, I mean, look, I looked good, I felt good, but I still wasn't like where I wanted to be, right? And like, hearing your journey of like doing some of those first fitness competitions, like, you feel like, oh, I worked so hard, and then it's so crushing when you get to that moment. And it's like, I'm sure you can relate, but like when you're your own worst enemy in that moment, like you're just like all of this negative stuff starts flooding in. Like, who am I? Why am I here? I'm such an imposter. Like, I'm the fat girl on stage. I'm that, like, geez. And like, I mean, no wonder I didn't win those pageants because like I had already discounted myself, before I even got there. Um, yeah.
Completely back, and now like knowing what I know about mindset and everything, I'm like, yeah, I blew all of my own competitions. I mean, the one that I talked about in the book, I didn't care, and I was like, I don't even want to be here. So of course that's the one I won. But like, yeah, all the other ones, and it's like, I'm sure it's similar. You're backstage waiting to go out, and you start looking at everyone else, and that's one of the tough things about growing
Yeah.
up is it kind of always lives within you. Like you still have this, even when the mirror, the exterior is reflecting that like you've made this massive transformation and you're this beautiful woman. It's like inside, I feel like for me forever, I still have this like little fat girl complex inside, and I still play sometimes. So yeah, I can totally relate.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the very positive thing though about doing pageantry is that I think doing that and getting so outside of my comfort zone and just proving to myself that I could do something so outside of my realm of just knowledge and everything, it like woke me up. It like, when people talk about like woke culture, like I feel awakened to like who I am supposed to be in the world. And like I would have never like quit my day job and become a professional singer and like, gone online to become a coach and all these things, right? If I hadn't just stepped out in total discomfort and done something, that was just truly for me. I think it was the first time that I ever really put a lot of time and energy into myself. And it was weird for me. It was weird for my family. It was weird for my friends just to see this version of me that was just more focused on myself. Like that was something that I had never done before. I talk about like on my podcast, sort of that like codependent behavior, right? Where, well, I'm happy if you're happy. And, I'm happy if I'm building you up and I'm happy if I'm building your business, right? And just never really looking inward to like, well, what do I want? Who am I? Who was I before I, started pouring all these layers on top of me, trying to serve everybody else's needs and wants in my life. So yeah, that was the greatest gift of doing that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And I just want to acknowledge, like, I think it's so cool that you were like, I've always wanted to do pageants, and it's not it's not too late. It's never too late to try things. And it's like, I know with other things, you started a podcast, you wrote a book, published a book. I think you're working on another book as well. But it's like
Yeah.
so beautiful and inspiring because I think so many of us will have an idea or there's something we want to do, we've always wanted to do, or, it pops up and we just so quickly dismiss it because it is out of our comfort zone and that is
Mm.
uncomfortable.
Right.
So and acknowledge and celebrate you for like, I think that's amazing because it's like we really have nothing to lose. It's an experience, and it's awesome that from you going for it and going into pageants like that really started to shift, the way you do life really, and
Mm.
focusing on like, oh, about what makes me feel happy and fulfilled,
Right.
because ultimately
Yeah.
around us too.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Exactly.
I love that. So I know you've come a really long way to get to this point, the other side of, struggling with these things growing up, and a lot of work around, your self-worth and self-image and all of that. So can you tell us a little bit about the healing journey, what that looked like for you, if that was kind of before the going into the pageants, or kind of in the mix of it, or just kind of what your healing journey looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, it's a long process, and I feel like it's okay, but I'm still in the process, and this is something that it's not like one day you just wake up and like, oh, I'm cured, it's something that like you just got to work on. I have to work on every day. But yeah, when I was in high school, that's especially like the time in my life where just really disordered eating, very unhealthy. I mean, very close to being hospitalized and those types of things. So, just getting into some therapy was really important for me. And my therapist suggested service, service to others, getting outside of myself, maybe helping other women discover like what was healthy for them, and just seeing that there are different bodies in the world. And I took my dance background and my love of fitness, and I started like teaching fitness classes and just getting really into that. And it was so awesome just seeing like the transformations that women were having, the empowerment, and them becoming confident. And even some of my students early on, just they loved it so much that they went on to teach classes and like inspire other women. So it was just, I think that getting outside of myself, and because, well, like it's funny because I talk about how like doing pageantry allowed me to focus on myself and what I wanted. But when I look back on like the disordered eating, I mean, that was self-centered in a way, right? It's like you're all wrapped up in your ego and all of this. So it's sort of like very confusing how it all comes together. But being able to get, I think, outside of yourself in service is like the important key, right? So doing that, and then I think um, also just learning how to deal with the codependency and like the codependent behavior around my family and my work, and finding like a program that I could follow that really helped me with that. So relying on a higher power, admitting that hey, like I can't do this alone, and I don't have to do this alone, right? And so, being able to, like I talk about the stoic principles, right? Like what can I control? What is totally and completely outside of my control? And I think just starting there, asking for, the courage to change every day, the courage to look at those things, and like asking for wisdom, right? Like the wisdom to know the difference, what is in my control, what's not in my control, how am I showing up in the world? And just admitting like those parts of me that I don't like so much, right? Being able to let those go. And then, just sort of, like I said, even just showing up in the world in service now, I think is really healing for me also as a coach, and being able to walk with people on that journey, being able to come on shows like yours and, share my story, and all of that is definitely part of the healing process.
So beautiful. So many amazing gems in what you just said. And yeah, I still struggle with the control piece. And I'm always like I want to know what happens next. You know what I mean? And it's like not how it goes, of course. And
Yeah.
I love what you said about, surrender and like really asking, opening up, and like that was such a powerful thing in my journey too, of like I can't do this alone, and like acknowledging, opening up. And every time, as I continue to do that in my life, when I do really let go, because sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm surrendering, but I'm like, I have a death, whatever.
Yes.
If I get the exact outcome I want, so not surrender at all, but when I get it, as long as it takes and I let go, it's like that's when miracles come in and beautiful things happen. And like, you look back and it's like, okay, it all makes sense. All of our journeys, it's like they have so many different chapters, and just things that happen, and it's like it's all, we can look back and see how it's always meant to be. But moving
Yeah.
forward and like comfortable in that uncertainty and like knowing we can't control it all, so we don't have to try. You know, is
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. And
so
there's freedom in that, really. I think we often think in our minds, well, if everything could just be exactly the way I want it, like then I'll be happy, then I'll be free, then I'll have joy. But it's actually the opposite, right? Like you're saying, like, surrender that will and just give it up, and like therein lies the joy.
yes, I love that. So, as far as I know, you incorporate a lot of stoic practices, philosophies, and the playfulness as well, keeping joy and fulfillment as the goal day to day instead of like again the external stuff.
Yeah.
So, what does that look like for you? I'd love to hear like daily, weekly, monthly, like any practices or things that you incorporate into your day to day life. What that looks
Yeah.
like.
I love that. So yeah, gratitude is huge for me. I start my day with a 15-minute meditation, and then, I love reading scripture. So, I just get connected in that way. And then yeah, I started journaling. It was really something I never thought I would ever do. I never had a diary as a kid. I was never one to like write, stuff down like that. So I'm glad that, eventually somewhere along the line, a coach had inspired me to do that. And yeah, writing gratitudes, at first it was so painstaking. I was like, all right, 3 gratitudes. Okay. Right. It's sort of like angst about it. And now it's like, I fill a whole page with, things to be grateful for. So it's slow going, but it'll come, so I do that. I mean, I definitely love to work out and exercise, and put the focus on, not like the exercise now in my life is not a punishment for eating bad or, having a cheat day or something like that. But, just moving my body and feeling good and, being strong and, feeling empowered. So I definitely do that as well. And I stay connected with the community. I have a group of people that, understand what I'm going through, who I am, my behavioral tendencies, and I'm connected to them. I have a weekly kind of touch base with those people, and it's nice because within that community, I can pick up the phone and say, okay, I'm feeling triggered. This is what's going on. So it's, I think, really important to have a community of people who understand you.
I love that so much, and I feel the same. And I notice when I am kind of in a funk or feeling anxious, depressed, or off in any way, like my natural inclination is to go inward, but we know that doesn't feel good. That doesn't help us get out of it. So really over the years I've cultivated those relationships as well. I think it's so important to have people where we can say like, hey, this is what I'm feeling, because just even having someone the other day I told my friend that I've been feeling, I feel like with the days getting shorter and like the change in seasons and all that, I'm feeling down. And she's like, me too. And like, not that I want that for anyone, but it's like, it's just so beautiful and healing to have people who get it. And like, you can just say
Mm,
what it is and like not have to bottle it up. And I do
right.
feel like journaling is almost like that too. Like it lets us get it out onto paper and, not have it just marinate.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's like, again, I mean, I'll say this to you 1,000 times, but like you writing this book is so important because when you're going through that as a young girl, as a female growing up into adulthood, it's such a lonely place to be. You feel like, oh, like, you looking at like your college roommates and stuff, right? Like they're just thin girls. Right? Like we just look at these people in our lives and go, well, must be nice. They're just skinny. And, but people probably looked at us and said the same thing, like, right? Like, oh, must be nice. They're, thin and pretty and all this. And we're like, do you not see all the struggle I'm going through? Right. So I think, being able to walk into a room or pick up a book or listen to a podcast or something and just have that little feeling of like, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one in the world that feels like this.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that because actually someone from my high school read the book and sent me a message and was like, I always thought you were like popular and unfriendly. And like, meanwhile, I was like just trying to keep my shit together. Um, idea. And yeah, it is. It's really like it's sad and crazy how, the statistics, it's like some studies show like 97% of women struggle with the body image, and even it's like 80% of girls have been on a diet by the age of 10. So again, looking back things, it's like the majority of women were feeling the way I was feeling. But yeah, when I was in it, I thought I was the only one, and nobody talked about it. And I
Right.
think again that's like, with even with entrepreneurship, it's like it's amazing. There's so many awesome pieces of, or doing things, putting things out into the world. I'm going to write a book, and cool. And everyone sees on social media, the glossy like highs and the highlight reel. And there's all the crying, like other stuff too behind the scenes. And again, like when no one talks about it, then we feel like we're the only one. Like I always say, a special sort of damaged, when in fact, like everyone doing these things, everyone in entrepreneurship is like, oh yeah, it's a total roller coaster, like mind F.
Yes.
So
I love that you share that because yeah, it's I think we all do that, right? Comparison is just the thief of joy. And how can you enjoy the journey getting, to all these goals if you're just constantly comparing yourself and being like, oh, look how easy it was for her or him or whatever.
yeah, yeah. So I would love to hear, because I haven't talked to a lot of authors on Body Talks, but I'd love to hear about your journey with writing the Playful Journal, and kind of like where that came from, the inspiration, and what the experience was like for you.
Yeah. So it began as a workbook that I had just basically printed out sheets and put them in a binder. And when I was working with my one-on-one clients, even mostly it was really just personal training back then, but I must have known that there was like so much more that I wanted to do. So I would hand people this binder and then like, they would kind of go through these exercises of like, just what made them feel playful and things like that. And it was really simple. And then it started to just grow more and more. And I found that I was sharing my story with people. And I had a lady in one of like a business mastermind that I would go to. And, I brought it, one day for people's like feedback. And she's like, have you thought about publishing this? Maybe expanding upon it and publishing it as a book. I think you could really just help so many people with it. And it just never occurred to me. I never thought of myself as an author. Wasn't like, I did public relations in college, so I like to write, but like, when you go from just writing things to being like an author, and publishing a book, like it's totally different, like, could I do this? So, yeah, just working with her, working with another, like coach that I had in my life, somebody who had already published a book, right? Just sort of all those questions like, how do I do this? Where do I do that? It's like so confusing when you're trying to do all that. But yeah, I love the interactive style of writing, and sort of that like take action, write something down because I think that was when I was really getting into journaling myself. And so I knew how much it was helping me. And so that's when like I wanted to inspire my clients to start journaling, right? And I was like, well, if I give them a story and then give them examples and then give them a prompt, maybe that'll help people to actually, like start to think through these things and ask these questions of themselves and write it down and, sort of have this like interactive relationship with the journal. So that's where that inspiration came from.
I love that. I love that. And yeah, I'm a big believer in journaling too, but I know that is a common thing. Is it's like, well, I bought the journal, and like now what do I do?
Right.
And like structure, and again, kind of like the reading about your story, and again, as we hear other people's stories and see, pieces of ourselves in that, I think it's really helpful and kind of gets the wheels turning. So you guys definitely check out, again, it's the Playful Journal, your 12-week guide to a more playful life. So definitely check that out. I'll share the link on my stories as
Oh,
well.
thank you.
So yeah, so then as we close, I would love to hear, I love asking this question, like for a woman who is kind of at a low point where you used to be, thinking back to one of your low points, if someone is there today, what advice would you give her?
Yeah, I was really giving a lot of thought to this question, Justine. I think it's like look inward, what and going back to even the journal, right? The playful journal, like what made you happy at one point? Is there something, a time in your life where you felt truly playful and joyful and like yourself? And how can you get even a small piece of that back? Um, for me, it was wanting to get back on stage and wanting to, get back out there in the world. And so, competing in a pageant was my answer. That was like, let's do something crazy. But, it doesn't have to be that crazy. It could be something simple. Maybe it's, signing up for an art class or joining the choir at your church or, just think of something that makes your heart sing and just do it. Don't apologize. Don't ask for permission because, you know, we're worthy. You're worthy. Everybody listening to this is worthy of doing the things that make their heart sing. And, don't ever let anybody tell you that you're not because it's just a lie.
I love that so much. And yeah, I totally, I'll take that in. But it's like such a powerful reminder. And I think our society is very like productivity driven all the time. And I've been sharing a lot lately because I've been on a total fiction kick, like reading all the fiction, just devouring it. And that's something I loved to do as a kid, along with writing and, a lot more creativity. And I think then we get older and like our lives become monotonous and everything has to be about productivity. And, so I used to feel like I would feel bad if I was reading fiction. And now
Mm.
it's like such a delight. And like, yeah, really getting back to the simple things that we can do day to day, just like for feeling joy. And because ultimately, like we were talking about kind of in the beginning, it's like we shoot for these goals or we want these things because we think that will make us happy, but it's like you said, it's the other way around. Start focusing on what makes us happy, then the path unfolds. So
Exactly. Exactly. Right. And when I coach people on their health journey, a lot of times it's about making yourself a priority. And for whatever reason, that's so difficult for people, women especially. And I'm not a mom yet, but I can imagine that once you become a mom, that becomes exponentially harder. Right. So I think, instead of trying to commit to, eating healthy and exercising and like doing all these things that we think, we have to do in order to be healthy. It's like, how about you just like pick up a book you enjoy and like just take a half hour, make that a priority for yourself, right? Just find little ways, color, whatever, like be creative, go for a walk out in nature, or, sit on the beach or something, right? It's like these little things that you can do to set yourself up as a priority in your life so that when you do want to incorporate these healthier habits, now it's easier because you're thinking of yourself in a different way.
totally. Yeah, and it's like energizing too. I find like, when we're doing the things that make us feel good, then we have so much more energy and then it's easier to make those like conscious, intentional decisions versus, yeah, when our lives are just totally draining and about productivity, it's like we don't feel very motivated to,
Right.
do better. So I love that so much. Well, this has been amazing, and I feel like we could chat all day. But thank you so much for being here today, Krystal, and sharing. There were so many beautiful gems in this, and yeah, just so thankful for your time and for joining us
Thank
today.
you. Oh my gosh, Justine. Thank you so much. This is like such a dream. So I am so, so blessed. I just feel very blessed by this interaction with you and what you're doing in the world and your book. And oh my gosh, like I feel like I want to buy 100 copies of this and just give it out to people for Christmas.
And back at you, like seriously, it's and you connect with someone and you're like, oh yeah, this is not a coincidence. It's not an accident. So I
Right.
feel that way with you. Super excited to have you in my world. And again, I appreciate you being here and the work that you're doing as well is so amazing. So thank you.
Thanks, Justine.
Thank you. And thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully, I'm sure you've got tons of notes and nuggets from this as well. So sending you guys all tons of love and have an amazing day.
Bye.